Luke. I'm doing my personal reflection video for Module 8, Unit 8, Activity 1 for Standards 6, 7, and 8. What did I learn from this lesson? Well, I learned that I don't really know how to explain why some students get a multiple choice test and some students get a longer answer test, or why students are getting like easier tests and more complicated tests very well. What I just said was I didn't really give a response to that question. And also making multiple level tests for the same material is rather tricky, since I have to think about what lower level students are capable of doing, and some of them, of the lowest level students, still struggled with it. So that means I would have to try and make something even easier for them. How the test was, if you haven't looked at the lesson plan yet, there's a question, and then there was 4 choices to choose from, an A, B, C, and a D. And what I learned from those who did the written answer version, or the long answer version, the more complicated one, I learned that some of them did well and some of them decided to not even try. One of the students finished their test quite quickly, and more than half of it was blank, and that just showed me that they didn't even try to read the questions. So I'd probably have to reiterate to read the questions carefully, and if they don't know a word, they can ask me as well. And I know the student that did this student can read very well, so I was rather surprised by that. And then if I would make any changes to this lesson, overall I think it went fairly well. We talked a lot about a mini sports day, which I cut from the video, that we were going to have the following day, the day after the recording of that lesson. So that probably added a lot more like excitement or extra energy and even distraction for some of the students, because they weren't thinking about today, they were thinking about going outside and having fun tomorrow. So then, so that added a little bit. So would I get rid of that if they didn't have a sports day the next day? Then yes, that wouldn't have been there, and that wouldn't have been a problem. So if I was to teach this lesson again, I'm not sure if I would just play the audio track. I would find like a YouTube video of the same story, and so that way the students can see and listen to the story, and so then that way they would be able to better retain the story as well, especially for the visual learners. And even though the recording was only 1 minute long, for some students, especially young ones, 1 minute of listening is an eternity. But it was also a good way for me to assess their listening skills. But also one more thing I would have added would be asking the students to summarize the story back to me after they've heard it once, and I might even have played the story one more time instead of just having them listen to it a couple of times. But in the Collins or the Cambridge listening test that they will have to be taking in at the end of the year, like December, January time, in the listening sections, they only get to listen to everything twice. So it's kind of a little bit of a preparation for that as well. So what went well in the lesson? Well, the word of the day went well. Thankfully, it was an easier word that day, and it was also an easier word for the students to understand. So the students did well with the Collins page book as well. They also remembered their periods too, and they were even mentioning it to each other. So that was quite encouraging. For improvements, like I mentioned before, I would have asked the students to summarize the story just to see how well they listened to the recording. I'm still on the fence about showing them the video or not, a video. And just the reasoning behind that is just the audio is to help them with their listening skills. Even if the student isn't an audible learner, they should still learn a little bit on how to learn just from listening. And it will also make their learning for them a lot easier in the future, since they will be more comfortable in a variety of learning environments. So that is my reflection on